For 7 long years, my son and his wife had lived under my roof, in the house I owned. Then, overnight, they supposedly won $85 million. Yet, rather than showing any gratitude for the shelter I'd provided, by midday, my daughter-in-law was viciously tossing my possessions from a second-story window. My china shattered on the pavement as she shrieked, "Our days of providing charity for you are over. Go find a nursing home to die in." I stood on the lawn, my clothes covered in dust, my heart beating with a strange calm. I quietly asked, "Did you happen to read the name written on the back of that ticket?" Her triumphant sneer faltered for just a moment. Soon, that one simple question would bring her entire glittering new world crashing down. If you're following my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment you post is a marker on this path with me. And if my experience resonates with you, please press the like button so this story can find others who need to hear it. My name is Lorraine Whitmore. I am 63 years old and have been a widow for almost 10 years. After my husband Arthur's passing, our 2-level home in the suburbs of Savannah, Georgia, was my sanctuary. It later became a refuge for my son, Mason, and his lovely but cutting wife, Brielle. It was 7 years prior, during an autumn tempest, that they arrived on my doorstep, drenched and cold, after Mason had lost his employment and with Brielle expecting their first child. I swung the door open, didn't bother with questions, and just said, "Get inside. This home will always have space for you." From that day on, we coexisted, 3 generations in one house, in what appeared to be peace, until that fateful morning. On that particular morning, I rose at my usual early hour to prepare coffee and pancakes for my grandchildren, 8-year-old Ava and 5-year-old Micah. However, the familiar pitter-patter of their feet on the stairs was replaced by a piercing shriek from the ground floor. "Mason, get up. You have to get up now." Brielle's voice was shrill, practically vibrating with excitement. I put the coffee pot down, my pulse racing. I was accustomed to my daughter-in-law's dramatic moods, but this was different. This was laced with excitement, panic, and something approaching mania. The old wooden stairs groaned as Mason thundered down. I waited at the top landing, holding my breath. A moment of quiet. Then, a sudden explosion of shouts. "No way. Oh my God, no way. We won, Mason. $85 million. Peering down, I saw Brielle grasping the lottery ticket, her entire body shaking with elation. Mason embraced her, laughing and saying over and over, "This is unreal. I can't believe it." They were both jumping, tears of disbelief streaming down their young, hungry faces. And I, the very person who had purchased that exact ticket just the day before, using the same numbers I'd played for 2 decades, a combination of all our family birthdays, stood motionless. My spirit plummeted, not due to the jackpot itself, but because neither of them thought to ask, "Mom, could this be your ticket?" I had started down the stairs, ready to speak, when Brielle turned, her eyes glittering like someone who just discovered a pirate's chest. "We're rich, Mason. Finally, we can get out of this dumpy old house." She said it and pressed the ticket to her lips like a holy relic. I froze. The words, "this dumpy old house," felt like a physical blow. The home Arthur and I had poured our lives into, financed with every bit of overtime, every saved penny, every wall we had painted with our own hands. I wanted to tell them I was the one who bought that ticket at the corner shop, but the words lodged in my throat. I looked at Mason, my only child, hoping for a flicker of recognition. He just stood there, letting Brielle steer the moment, as he always did. I turned and walked back to my small attic room, my heart a leaden weight. I tried to brew some tea, but my hands were trembling so badly I spilled water across the small table. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like an intruder in my own home. Within an hour, I heard cars arriving, curious neighbors, drawn by the news of the lottery family. I could hear laughter, slamming doors, and the clinking of glasses. From my window, I watched Brielle holding court on the lawn, waving the ticket, with Mason beside her, managing an awkward smile. Around lunchtime, a sharp, insistent rap came at my door. Brielle was on the landing, her arms folded and her lips twisted into a sneer. Get your things together. We're leaving, and we have no intention of dragging any dead weight with us. The words didn't register at first. Dead weight? I echoed, my voice raspy. That's right. We're buying a mansion. It makes no sense for you to tag along. At your age, you're better off in a nice nursing home. They can look after you there. I met her gaze. This is my house, Brielle. It was, she said, stressing the word. We have a new life now, Lorraine. And you're not in it. She then barged past me, yanked open my closet, and began throwing my belongings, dresses, my wedding photograph, a ceramic vase I'd made in college, out the window, letting them crash onto the yard below. I stood in silence as neighbors gathered, their whispers audible. Mason hovered in the doorway, hands jammed in his pockets, his face pale. He never moved to stop his wife. Brielle, that's enough, he mumbled, but she ignored him. Our days of providing charity for you are over, she screamed, projecting her voice for the entire neighborhood to hear. The words were a knife in my gut. I quietly bent down, retrieved the shattered picture frame, and wiped the grime from the glass with my sleeve. My elderly neighbor from across the street rushed over to help me, but I waved her off. Thank you, but I'll manage. I gathered the few items that hadn't been destroyed, a handful of clothes, the wedding photo, and the small box that held Arthur's ring. When a worn-out yellow taxi arrived, I stood and took a deep, steadying breath. I turned to Mason, the son I once thought would always defend his mother. You have nothing to say to this? I asked, my voice level and strong. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Brielle's she's just gone a bit overboard, Mom. No, Mason, I said. This is the decision you've both made. I walked to the gate, then paused. Brielle was still there, arms crossed, that smug, victorious look plastered on her face. I fixed my gaze directly on her. Did you happen to read the name written on the back of that ticket? For a fraction of a second, her smile froze. A shadow of doubt passed through her eyes before she masked it with contempt. I have no idea what you're babbling about. I didn't reply. I opened the taxi door, placed my suitcase in the trunk, and gave the driver a quiet instruction. Anywhere. Just find the cheapest motel nearby. As the cab pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Mason was a statue on the steps. My 2 grandchildren were pressed against the upstairs window, their faces streaked with tears. Brielle had turned her back, holding a phone to her ear, but I could see the rigid tension in her shoulders. I found lodging in a room situated above a Chinese eatery. It was barely large enough for a single bed, a rickety nightstand, and a window that was painted shut. The odor of cooking oil permeated everything, clinging to my hair and clothes. Seated on the bed's edge, I opened my handbag and removed a paper folded into fourths, the original purchase receipt. The signature, Lorraine Whitmore, written hastily in the box, was perfectly legible. I traced the letters with my finger, hearing Arthur's voice in my memory, always sign your name, Lorraine. People can forget anything else, but a signature doesn't lie. A faint smile touched my lips. The city hummed with life outside, but in that cramped room, I felt a profound sense of calm. They believed I had been defeated, but in truth, the contest was only just commencing. After Arthur was buried, the house became so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking from 2 rooms away. I missed him terribly, his tall, lanky build, the way he'd pretend to complain when I used too much garlic, his gruff laugh first thing in the morning. Being widowed at 56 taught me to be quiet, to rely on small rituals to feel his presence. I'd pour 2 cups of coffee every morning, I'd straighten his favorite armchair, and sometimes I'd whisper to the empty room, "I'm doing all right, Arthur." Then, one wet February night, Mason appeared. He was standing on the porch, drenched, holding one suitcase. Brielle was behind him, her makeup running, her eyes puffy from crying. "Mom, we were evicted. My company went under. The landlord wants the rent. We can't." I opened the door wide, asked no more questions, and nodded. "Get inside." This home will always have space for you. Brielle wept with relief. She was young, strikingly pretty, and knew exactly how to elicit sympathy. That day, I was certain I was doing the right thing. I never dreamed that Mason's, just for a few months, would turn into 7 years. 7 years of me slowly becoming a servant in the house that bore my name on the deed. Initially, it was fine. I gave them the large master bedroom downstairs, the one Arthur had loved for its morning light. The sunshine will be good for the baby, I'd said. Mason had squeezed my hand. Thanks, Mom. I'll make it up to you, I promise. But he never did. After Ava was born, and Micah's 2 years after that, Brielle made no move to find employment. Mason drifted from one job to the next, some months contributing nothing at all. I ended up paying for all the utilities, the food, and the home insurance policy using my retired teacher's pension and the meager savings Arthur had left behind. I didn't mind. I held on to the belief that family balances out, that when they were on their feet, they would be there to support me. I remembered Arthur's words before he passed, "If you can help it, Lorraine, don't ever let our boy go hungry." So, I did whatever it took to keep the household running. I'd wake at 5 a.m. to make breakfast for everyone, pack a lunch for Mason, and drive Ava to preschool. In the afternoons, I'd do the laundry, prepare dinner, and rock Micah to sleep. The entire house ran on a schedule I maintained myself. Then, Brielle approached me one afternoon. "Mom, I require a silent space for my work. My old firm is giving me some freelance consulting projects. Perhaps you could relocate to the attic? I can convert your room into an office." I paused. The attic was merely a storage area, with a low, slanted ceiling. It was stifling in the summer and freezing in the winter. But she used that sweet, persuasive tone. "It's much more private up there. You can get away from the noise the kids make." I managed a smile. "If it helps you, dear, of course." I didn't realize that decision was cementing my place at the very top of my own house, effectively pushing me out of my role as the family's matriarch. From that day forward, I was, for all intents and purposes, Miss Lorraine, the woman who lived upstairs. Brielle redesigned the kitchen, using a label maker for everything. Top shelf is for the kids, bottom shelf is for Mason's snacks. "You can keep your tea things in this cabinet here." I didn't argue, but I felt like a tenant. That winter, she began hosting adults-only dinner parties. I would still prepare the meal and set the dining table, but just as guests arrived, Brielle would pat my arm. "Mom, I've set a plate for you in the kitchen. We're going to be talking about business." I would retreat, close the kitchen door, and eat my meal alone under the harsh fluorescent light, listening to the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from the other room, with Brielle playing the role of the gracious hostess. I kept reasoning with myself. It's fine. They're young. They deserve their own life. I just need to stay out of the way. But silence, when practiced long enough, becomes a cage. When Ava began to speak, Brielle instructed her to call me Miss Lorraine, not Grandma. "Grandma sounds so old-fashioned, Mom," she'd said. "Miss Lorraine is more modern and respectful." I pretended to find it amusing, but later that night, I wept privately in the bathroom. The next day, I was back to warming my granddaughter's bottle as if nothing had happened. In the 3rd year, Mason found part-time work as an engineer. When I asked about his salary, he'd avoid my gaze. "It's enough to get by, Mom." I knew it wasn't, but I didn't push. When you see that look of shame in your child's eyes, a mother learns to feign blindness. I continued to cover the mortgage, the insurance, the utilities, and often loaned them money for Ava's school fees. I told myself I could manage, as long as the family stayed together. By the 4th year, Brielle was enforcing new rules. "Mom, the kids can't have sugar after 7 p.m. Mom, the house needs to be perfect, we have guests coming. Mom, you're folding the towels wrong. This is the way I want them." Each directive was minor, but together they felt like 1,000 tiny cuts. I listened. I complied. I held my tongue. One evening, I made Arthur's favorite beef stew. The aroma filled the house. Mason inhaled deeply. Wow, Mom. It's been ages. Brielle shot him a look. Red meat is loaded with cholesterol, Mason. You don't want to end up like your father, do you? The table went quiet. I looked at my plate and said softly, your father ate this his whole life and was healthy as an ox. She smirked. Different generation, Mom. After that night, I understood. I was no longer permitted to cook from memory in this house. Mason wasn't a bad person, he was just a weak one. When I'd try to tell him Brielle was being unkind, he would sigh. She's just stressed, Mom. I'm not home, and she's dealing with 2 kids all day. And I'm the one running the entire house. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Sometimes I'd overhear Brielle on the phone with her friends. I'm living with my mother-in-law, and it's a nightmare. She's so controlling. Each time, I'd wonder who she was possibly describing. I had ceased to have any control over anything. I just cleaned, cooked, and logged our expenses in a little book. I vividly recall one spring morning. I was in the backyard hanging clothes when I overheard Brielle in the kitchen speaking to Mason. Do you have any idea how this looks? A grown couple, mooching off his elderly mother. I want our own place. But Mom pays the mortgage here. It's not like we can just sell it. Then just get her to sign the deed over. She doesn't need a house this big by herself, anyway. I stood frozen behind the curtains, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from the cold realization that I had given them so much, piece by piece, that they now truly believed it all belonged to them. That summer, I began to journal. Every night, I'd open an old leather-bound book. The first entry was always the same, day 34 of patience. I didn't write much, just small observations. Brielle complained about the towels. Mason forgot to pick up Ava. Micah has a fever. I was up all night. They were tiny, cramped entries, like the last traces of a person fading from her own life. Despite it all, one part of me remained unchanged, my love. I loved Mason, the little boy who used to give me piggyback rides when my back ached. I loved my grandchildren, whose laughter was the brightest sound in the house. I even, in some way, loved Brielle, despite her cruelty. I suppose I believed people could be better, that one day they would see that everything I did was an act of love. But patience has an endpoint. And the thing that finally broke me wasn't a major confrontation. It was a small thing, so insignificant that others might think I was overreacting. Yet I remember that afternoon perfectly. I remember the angle of the sun and the precise words Brielle said that finally extinguished my endurance. Ava's 10th birthday arrived on a luminous April afternoon, the air thick with the scent of azaleas. I can still see her face as she pointed to the display in the sporting goods store window, a turquoise bicycle with a white basket and glittering handlebar streamers. Grandma, she breathed, if I had that bike, would never, ever be late for school. I smiled, a resolve forming in my chest. I was well aware of the bicycle's cost, $200, which was nearly the entire remainder of my pension for the month after I'd paid the bills. I debated it endlessly but ultimately resolved to purchase it. I saved every coin, cutting back on my own groceries for weeks, forgoing my small treat of almond milk. A girl only turns 10 once, I told myself. And sometimes, a single gift can define a childhood. 3 days before her birthday, I walked to the shop and bought the turquoise bike. The clerk, a young man with kind eyes, helped me pick out sunflower print wrapping paper and a big white bow. I hid the bike in the garage under an old tarp, my heart light with anticipation. I barely slept, imagining Ava's expression. Arthur would have approved. He always said, the smallest kindnesses often leave the biggest mark. I wanted to give her a mark like that. On the morning of her party, I rose before dawn. I made heart-shaped pancakes with strawberries and cream. The kitchen smelled of vanilla and joy. I hung a few balloons and set a vase of roses on the table. I even put on an old blue dress Arthur had once said he liked. Ava hurried down the steps, her pigtails flying. It's my birthday. Grandma, you made pancakes. I opened my arms for a hug. Of course, sweetheart. And I have a big surprise for you. I barely got the words out before Brielle entered, wrapped in a silk robe, her hair in a messy bun. She scanned the room, her gaze landing on the balloons and strawberries. Mom, what is all this? I told you we weren't making a fuss. It's just a special breakfast for Ava, dear. It was no trouble, I answered softly. She opened the refrigerator, poured herself juice, and turned. You know, she said in that syrupy sweet voice, Mason and I decided this year we're teaching her about conservation. No expensive gifts. We want her to learn the value of things. I glanced at Ava, whose smile was already fading. I tried to keep my voice even. Don't you worry. It's just a small something from me. Brielle raised an eyebrow. Small? You'll see tonight, I smiled. She said nothing, but her eyes were suspicious. I knew she hated when I did anything that might make her look bad in front of the children. With Brielle, every gift was a competition. That afternoon, when Mason and the kids got home, I grabbed the key to the garage. Ava, come with Grandma, I called. She ran to my side, her eyes wide as I drew back the covering to show her the glittering turquoise bicycle. Oh my goodness, Ava whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. It's perfect. Is it really for me, Grandma? I nodded. Happy birthday, my angel. She threw her arms around my neck, a tangle of joyful laughter and tears. My heart felt full to bursting. But the moment was fleeting. Brielle's voice sliced through the air from the doorway. What is that? She stalked closer, her eyes fixed on the bike, then on me. I told you, Mom. No expensive gifts. I remained calm. It's a bicycle, Brielle. She's been dreaming of it. That's not the point. The point is you are deliberately undermining our parenting rules. Rules? I repeated, a small, sad smile on my face. I wasn't aware that love came with a rulebook. She stepped closer, her voice low and vicious. You did this to make me look bad, didn't you? To show the kids you're the better one. Brielle, don't be dramatic, Mason chimed in, but his voice was weak. I looked at her. I did this because I love my granddaughter. It's as simple as that. Ava, terrified by the conflict, grabbed my hand. Mommy, please, I'll take care of it. I won't ask for anything else, ever, she sobbed. Brielle just sighed, then crouched to Ava's level. Sweetheart, we just want you to learn. This bike isn't appropriate. Grandma is going to take it back, and you'll understand why adults have to be responsible. No. Ava wailed, clinging to me. That is enough, Brielle, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. If you want to teach a lesson, you can do it with your own money. You will not do it with her joy. She just pressed her lips into a thin line and took out her phone. Mom, either you return that bike, or I will. I'm not playing. That same afternoon, I wheeled the bicycle back to the shop, my feet feeling like lead. The wind rustled the streamers, making them whisper like Ava's morning laughter. I took one last look at the white bow before I went inside. I need to return this, I told the kind-eyed clerk. Are you sure, ma'am? It was our last one in that color. Yes. The little girl, she changed her mind. My hand trembled as I signed the refund slip. I folded the receipt and put it in my purse. A cold drizzle had started by the time I left, the drops mixing with the saltiness at the corner of my mouth. That evening, the home was silent. No party, no celebration. I placed the small vanilla cake I had already purchased on the kitchen table. Beside it, I set the card I'd written, Happy birthday, Ava. I love you always. Grandma. I lit a single, small candle and observed it melt away, its flame reflecting in the glass of Arthur's photograph on the wall. Do you see this? I whispered to him. Our granddaughter can't have a bicycle because of a lesson in frugality. I have no voice left in my own home. I got up, donned my coat, and went out into the cold April night. The neighborhood convenience store was casting a faint, yellow light. I hadn't planned on going there, I just needed to walk. The owner, an Italian man I'd known for years, smiled. "Evening, Miss Lorraine. Coffee?" I shook my head, and my gaze landed on the lottery display by the register. A small sign read, "Tomorrow's jackpot, $85 million. I gave a dry, tired laugh. "One ticket, please." With these numbers. I recited the familiar sequence: 10, 14, 21, 25, 30, 41, 47. The birthdays of Arthur, myself, Mason, and the two children. The numbers I'd played for 20 years as a quiet ritual. I took a pen from my purse and signed the back, Lorraine Whitmore. Arthur's old rule echoed in my head, always sign it, Lorraine. A signature is the one thing they can't argue with. I smiled at the owner. "I could use some luck tonight." "Well, I hope you get everything you're wishing for," he replied. Walking home, I looked at the houses, all lit from within, and wondered how many other people felt as I did, exhausted, but still trying to believe in goodness, even after being wounded by their own. I wasn't wishing for riches. I was wishing for a way out. Upon returning home, I left the ticket and its receipt on the kitchen table, right out in the open, like a quiet offering to the universe. Then I went up to my attic room and listened to the rain. The following morning, just as dawn was breaking, I was jolted awake by Brielle's scream. Her voice was high-pitched, hysterical. "Mason, wake up. Wake up now. We won." I heard pounding footsteps, a gasp, and then a cascade of laughter and sobs. $85 million. "Oh my God, Mason, we won $85 million. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering. I didn't have to see it to know precisely which ticket she was holding. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down. Brielle was clinging to Mason, weeping with joy, holding aloft the ticket I had bought. "I can't believe it," she shrieked. "I just picked it up off the table. Our lives are changed forever." Mason, spinning her around, just laughed. I stood there on the landing, invisible. What had started with a returned bicycle was now escalating into a storm I could never have predicted. I said nothing. I just watched the two people I had sheltered for 7 years dance in my kitchen, convinced that fate had just rewarded them. I closed my eyes and told myself, "Be still, Lorraine. Let them have their moment." I wanted to see just how far their greed would carry them, and if, along the way, either of them would find the conscience to admit that ticket was never theirs. 3 days following their win, the telephone in my rented room began to ring. It was 7 in the morning. I missed the first call, but it rang again immediately, with an urgency that set me on edge. "This is Grant Holloway, legal counsel for the Georgia State Lottery Commission." His voice was a calm, professional baritone. "I need to confirm some information regarding a lottery ticket registered to a Lorraine Whitmore. Is this a convenient time?" I steadied my own voice. "Yes. I am the one who purchased that ticket." I heard the rustle of papers on his end. "We have matched the signature, the ticket's serial number, and our internal records. The ticket was officially registered under the name Lorraine Whitmore." "Is that correct?" "That is correct." "Then, congratulations. You are the sole winner of the $85 million prize." I was silent for a beat. Not from shock, but from a strange, heavy sense of inevitability. It wasn't joy I felt, but the grim satisfaction of a storm, long watched on the horizon, finally making landfall. Mr. Holloway's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "However, I must make you aware that third parties have contacted the commission. They are also laying claim to this ticket. A woman by the name of Brielle Carter Whitmore." I closed my eyes and permitted myself a small, weary smile. "She even remembered to use the hyphenated last name, didn't she?" "She did," he said, a note of surprise in his voice at my lack of panic. "Her claim is that the ticket was purchased with marital funds and that you forgive the bluntness, are no longer competent to manage your own assets. I let out a soft, dry laugh. They haven't changed. When they can't take something by force, they try to claim I'm not sane enough to own it. I heard the clacking of a keyboard. So we can protect your legal standing, could you verify a few items? The signature on the back, your social security number, and the time of purchase? I opened my wallet and slid out the receipt I had laminated. I have the receipt right here. Benny's Corner Mart. 7:43 p.m., Friday, April 12th. The serial number on it matches the ticket. I also have my identification, and I'm sure the store's security footage will confirm it. I spoke with perfect clarity. On the other end, Mr. Holloway's voice was tinged with impressed relief. Excellent. That is more than enough to confirm you as the legal owner. But I must caution you, these individuals seem prepared to make this difficult. They may spread rumors about your mental state or even attempt to produce falsified medical documents. I sighed, but my resolve didn't falter. Don't worry, Mr. Holloway. I'm quite used to their attempts to redefine me. In my life, I've been called many things. One more label won't make a difference. After a pause, he said slowly, you are, without a doubt, the calmest person I have ever informed of an $85 million win. I smiled. That's because, for me, the money isn't the real prize. The truth is. Before we hung up, he reminded me, the claim window closes 10 days from today. If you require it, we can provide security or connect you with independent financial planners. I thanked him. I'll handle my own arrangements. But give me a few days. I want to see just how far this performance of theirs will go. After the call, I sat in the quiet. The morning sun found a crack in the curtains, illuminating the room's peeling paint. I felt suspended between two realities, the shabby room smelling of stale oil, and the life of the people who were, at that very moment, celebrating with my money. I took out my old notebook and wrote, Day 1 after the win. I am still in a cheap room, but I am richer than they are. I still have my self-respect. I closed the book and dialed Penelope Banks. My neighbor of 30 years, Penelope is a no-nonsense woman who commands respect and has no tolerance for deceit. Lorraine. My goodness, where are you? The entire street is talking. I knocked on your door, but your daughter-in-law said you'd gone on a vacation? I laughed. Yes, I'm on a vacation. One with no amenities and the lovely perfume of a deep fryer. What on earth? Pen, I require your assistance. I was brief. Keep an eye on the house for a few days. Write down dates, license plates, any new vehicles that show up. I need to know how quickly they're spending this money. Penelope was silent for a moment, then asked, What are you planning, Lorraine? I'm not planning to do anything, I said lightly. I'm just going to let the truth arrive at the most opportune moment. That afternoon, I visited the local bank and rented a small safe deposit box. The young teller asked, What will you be storing today, ma'am? My future, I said, placing the original laminated receipt, a photocopy of the ticket, and my ID inside. I kept digital copies of everything on my phone. I had learned that justice is best served when it's kept in multiple locations. As I left the bank, I saw my reflection in the glass doors, an older woman, silver-haired, wearing a simple cardigan, with an unervingly steady gaze. Arthur used to say, You're all softness, Lorraine, but if someone pushes you, you're all steel. In that moment, I knew he was right. I walked to a small sidewalk cafe and ordered a black coffee. I pulled out my notebook again. Saturday, 10 a.m. They still believe I'm weak. They don't know the ticket has already spoken for me. I'm not fleeing, I'm preparing. Each falsehood they tell is a snare, and I just need to be patient until it springs. That night, the first text from Mason arrived. Mom, we need to speak. Brielle is just stressed. Don't believe what you see in the papers. The papers? I pulled up the local news site on my phone. And there it was, Savannah pair claims jackpot. Elderly mother reportedly gifted ticket to son, then vanishes. I laughed out loud. Their lies were so clumsy. Congratulations, Brielle, I murmured to the empty room. You just publicly admitted I was the one who bought the ticket. I texted Mason a simple reply, don't worry about me. I'm not missing. I'm just finally seeing clearly. Then I shut off my phone and lay back on the thin mattress. The rules of the game had fundamentally changed. They could lie, they could spend, they could slander, but they could not erase the truth of my signature. I put my hand on my notebook and wrote one last thought before turning off the light. Tomorrow, they will buy more things. More cars, more clothes, more lies. And I will simply smile. This was never about money. It's about character. I used to think greed only surfaced during desperation. I was wrong. It flourishes when you're given something you never earned. A mere 3 days after finding the ticket, Brielle began acting like a celebrity. She launched a new social media profile under the name, The Lucky Whitmore. In heavily filtered live streams, she'd pose in an ivory silk robe, swirling a wine glass, a beatific smile on her face. Life is incredibly just, she cooed to thousands of watchers. When you behave honorably, the universe provides a reward. I watched the video on my phone from my tiny room, a bitter laugh caught in my throat. By behaving honorably, she was positioning herself as virtuous, and by extension, painting me as the opposite, a senile, dependent burden. During her live broadcast, she claimed, my mother-in-law had previously pledged to give any winnings to the family, and we were hesitant to accept. But she insisted. Every word was a calculated performance of humility, designed to plant a seed of doubt. I scrolled through the comments, you are so fortunate to have such a giving mother-in-law. She must really love you to do that. And the one that stung, I hope that old lady doesn't try to take it back. They had no idea. But they would. That same morning, Penelope phoned. Lorraine, you will not believe what is happening over here. It's a circus. We've seen furniture trucks, massive floral arrangements being delivered, and there's a brand new SUV sitting in your driveway. The sticker is still in the window. I laughed softly. Oh, I believe you, Pen. I can even guess the color, black with a metallic finish. A sport model, isn't it? She gasped. Exactly. How did you know? No need to guess, Pen, I said. With Brielle, it's always the grandest gesture, especially if she has an audience. By noon, Penelope had sent me photographs. There was Brielle, posing by my front door next to a newly installed sign that read, The Whitmore Residence, clutching a bouquet of white roses. Mason was beside her, a strained smile fixed on his face, while my grandchildren stood awkwardly in matching white outfits, looking less like children and more like props in an advertisement. White roses. Arthur always said, nothing is quite as empty as a white rose. All that beauty, but no heart. I'd never understood how true that was until now. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Brielle. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a chilling departure from the woman who had evicted me from my own home. Miss Lorraine? I was just hoping we could have a gentle chat. We are family, after all. I remained silent. About that ticket, she continued, I think there's just been a tiny misunderstanding. I just need you to sign a small confirmation, stating that it wasn't yours. It's just a formality, really, to help the bank move things along. I let out a small, quiet laugh. Brielle, when exactly did you read the name on the back of the ticket? Lorraine's question, though softly spoken, held more power than any shout of revenge. If you have ever been dismissed or belittled as she was, would you stay quiet, or would you find your voice as she did? Share your own feelings below. Sometimes, a single honest comment can be a lifeline for someone else facing the same struggle. There was dead air on the other end of the line. The silence stretched on, long enough for me to hear the audible quickening of her breath. Then, she pivoted. You know, people online have been saying you're not, well, not in a stable situation. I'm just terribly worried that someone might try to take advantage of you. I cut her off. Thank you for your concern. But the only person who has ever taken advantage of me is the one I'm speaking to right now. I ended the call. As I looked out the window, a light rain had begun to fall, each drop tapping against the glass like a warning drumbeat for the coming storm. The next night, an email arrived from Mr. Holloway. Ms. Whitmore, we have just received a formal letter from the Law Office of Carter Whitmore Family Holdings. It alleges you lack the financial and mental capacity to manage such assets and formally requests that financial guardianship be transferred to your son, Mason Whitmore. I wasn't shocked. I knew Brielle would play this card, leveraging the senile mother narrative she had been carefully crafting in public. Still, I asked, what's your assessment, Mr. Holloway? He gave a short, dry laugh. My assessment is that it's a desperate, poorly advised move. They don't grasp the law. Your signature, the original dated receipt, the purchase data from the store, it's all ironclad. If they pursue this, they are only creating legal trouble for themselves. Then let them, I said. The deeper they walk into this lie, the more footprints they'll leave behind. The following day, Penelope called again, her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Lorraine, I've been hearing them shouting all afternoon. Mason actually yelled, stop it. This is my mother. And then Brielle screamed back, no. If you don't take my side, you lose everything. I closed my eyes. I saw Mason as a little boy, promising he would protect me forever, Mom. Now he was trapped between his mother and the wife who was systematically eroding his character. I didn't feel anger toward him, just a profound sadness. I lit a small candle and placed it by Arthur's photograph. The flame illuminated his kind, steady face. Do you see this, Arthur? I whispered. I'm doing what you asked. I'm not bowing my head. I'm standing tall, even if I have to stand alone. I watched the flame flicker. Every time a draft came through the window, it wavered, but it never went out. In that small, persistent light, I saw myself. Shaken, perhaps, but still burning. I opened my notebook to a new page. Already spent it, Mom. Deposits on 2 cars, a down payment on a mansion on Tybee Island, a signed contract for furniture, even paid for a trip to Europe. All from a pending funds account. They said the money would be there soon. I sat on the hard plastic chair and listened, each word from him a fresh cut. So, I asked quietly, you spent money that you never had? Mason was silent. I waited for an excuse, but none came. Just a heavy sigh and the sound of him running a hand through his hair. I closed my eyes. Mason, for 7 years, who paid the electric bill? The water? The insurance? Who paid for your children's schooling? No answer. I repeated, slower, who, Mason? After a long, heavy pause, he said softly, you did. That's right, I said. I did. The woman you told people was living off you. The one you allowed to be thrown out of her own home. The one your wife is now trying to label as incompetent. And only now you call to ask if the ticket was mine? Mason's voice cracked. I didn't know Brielle would go that far. She thought you wouldn't take it back. I gave a short, bitter laugh. She doesn't know me at all, Mason. I can forgive being poor. I cannot forgive deceit. I paused, then said firmly, you want to talk? Fine. You come to me. Today, at 2 o'clock. Mason was quiet. I heard a car engine start on his end. Mom. I'll be there. Good, I said. But bring the truth. No gifts, no excuses. Just the truth. After I hung up, I looked around my small, shabby room. It wasn't beautiful, but it was mine. I wiped the dust from the chair, opened the window, and let in the morning air, a mix of cooking oil and coffee from below. That smell, which once bothered me, now felt real. Before it was time for him to arrive, Mr. Holloway called. Ms. Whitmore, I've secured your identity verification and prize claim appointment. 3 p.m. tomorrow at the main office. Please be there 15 minutes early. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Thank you, Grant. This is almost over. Do you want us to notify the press? In a case with this much conflict, they are very interested. Not yet, I answered. I want a few people to hear the truth from me before the rest of the world does. After the call, I brewed peppermint tea. I sat at the table and opened my notebook. Monday. My son asked, "Did you buy the ticket?" I answered, "Yes." This morning, for the first time in 7 years, I think he finally heard his mother's real voice. I looked at an old photo on the wall, of me, Arthur, and a 5-year-old Mason. "Arthur," I whispered, "what would you do? Would you forgive him?" I answered my own question in the silence. "Maybe you would." "I won't." I knew protecting my son no longer meant shielding him, it meant forcing him to face his own choices. It wasn't even 2 o'clock, but I was ready. I set out 2 cups. I sat, my hand on my notebook, and told myself, if he chooses conscience, I will save him. If he chooses silence, I will let the law do its work. 1 more hour. This time, Mason, I thought, you won't just meet your mother. You'll meet the woman you and your wife woke up. The woman you should never have underestimated. I took a sip of tea. I looked at the empty chair across from me and said aloud, "Son. I'm waiting." The knock came at 2 p.m. exactly. I opened the door. Mason stood there, his face pale and drawn, his eyes sunken. He looked around the shabby room, the stained ceiling, the single bed, the damp spot in the corner, and then his gaze met mine. His voice was tight. "I'm sorry, Mom." I just motioned to the chair. "Sit down, Mason. This room isn't much, but at least it's honest." He hadn't been sitting for 5 minutes when Brielle arrived. Her heels clacked sharply on the concrete floor, and a wave of cloying perfume flooded the room. She swept in, scanned the space, and smirked. "Cozy, isn't it?" I set my cup down calmly. "It's warm, Brielle, because there are no lies in it." She perched on the edge of the bed and pulled out her phone, as if this were a business negotiation. "I'll be brief," I said. "This morning, the lottery's legal counsel confirmed it. The name on the ticket is Lorraine Whitmore. The payout is set. The money will be in my account within 24 hours. The room went silent. Finally, Brielle let out a thin laugh. "So you're just going to keep it all?" "I am going to keep what is mine," I replied. "Mom," Mason interjected, "I didn't come to fight. I thought maybe we could make a deal. A family agreement, so no one has to go to court." I smiled, a sad, tired smile. "A deal?" "Mason, I've been making deals for 7 years. I made a deal by staying silent when I was insulted. I made a deal by paying the bills. I made a deal by watching your children while your wife called me a freeloader. And the final deal was being thrown out of my house." Mason stared at his lap. "You misunderstand," Brielle cut in, her voice smooth. "If we cooperate, everyone wins. We can buy a magnificent house. You can live with us. You'll have your own private suite. Your own kitchenette, a private bath. Every comfort." My voice went cold as steel. "A private suite? In your estate?" "That's right," she said quickly, sensing a victory. "Quiet, private. Just for you." I looked her right in the eye. "That sounds less like a mother's room and more like a dog kennel out back." Her face went blank. Before Mason could speak, I held up a hand. "Before we talk about cooperation, I want answers." I opened a drawer and took out a folded paper, my expense log. "First question," I said, my eyes on Brielle. "Who threw my belongings out the window?" She rolled her eyes. "I just lost my temper." "So you admit it." "Second question, who called me a freeloader and a dead weight. What do you want, an apology? She snapped. I want the truth. And Mason was standing right there. He can confirm. Mason flinched. Mom, yes. Brielle said it. I heard her. Brielle whipped her head toward him, eyes blazing. What are you doing? I'm telling the truth, Mason said, a flicker of strength in his voice. Thank you, Mason, I said quietly. You finally said what you should have said 7 years ago. I unfolded the paper. Electric bill, $118 a month, for 7 years. Water. Roof repair in 2021, $3,418. Ava and Micah's school costs, $18,600. Groceries, medicine. I stopped counting. I folded the paper. This is evidence of kindness, Mason, not obligation. You think you're some kind of saint? Brielle hissed, her composure cracking. Keeping score? If you don't sign a transfer, I'll sue you for fraud. I stood up, calmer than I ever thought possible, and pointed to the door. You are free to leave, Brielle. The courthouse isn't far. Go ahead. Life will teach you this lesson for me. You'll regret this, she seethed. No, I said. You will. When you realize that money can't buy you peace, and when your children ask why grandma isn't there, and when your husband finally stops bowing to you, then you'll know who truly lost. Her face contorted. Without another word, she spun around, her heels hammering the floor, and slammed the door behind her. The room was quiet again. Just me and Mason. He had his head in his hands. Mom, I don't know what to say. I let it go too far. I put a hand on his shoulder. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Mason. It's remembering and choosing not to seek revenge. I stepped back. Now go. Take care of your children. Tomorrow, I will claim my money. After that, we'll talk again. If you still want a mother. He squeezed my hand and left. That evening, Mason returned. He was alone, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red. I was sitting at the same table, with 2 cups of tea, as if the storm had never passed. You don't need to explain, Mason, I said softly. I understand. Now, I want to talk about the future, and the conditions for that future to exist. He nodded, his hands clenched. I will help you, I began, but not for your sake. For Ava and Micah. I saw hope in his eyes. I will cover the debts you and Brielle incurred on those cars and the house. Consider it me protecting my grandchildren from their parents' chaos. But do not thank me. This help comes with conditions. I met his gaze. First, you end this toxic marriage. No stalling. I will not finance a life for the woman who tried to destroy me. Second, you will apologize. Publicly. On the front steps, in front of the neighbors who watched you do nothing. You need to learn responsibility. Third, you will go to counseling for single fathers. Your children deserve an example, not a doormat. The air was thick. What about Brielle? He whispered. She will scream, and she will threaten. And I will let her, I said. As if summoned, a hard knock hammered the door. Brielle burst in. Perfect. Mommy and son, plotting? Mason stood up. Brielle, I told you to stay home. So you could let her brainwash you? She turned to me. What's this? Emotional blackmail? I'm setting the terms for forgiveness, Brielle, I said calmly. And you are not on the list. Oh, really? She sneered. I'll take full custody and half the assets. I know my rights. I smiled, a small, tired smile. Then sue me, Brielle. But remember, don't use my money to hire your lawyer. There was a flicker in her eyes, confusion, maybe fear. Mason stepped forward and put a hand on my shoulder. His voice was rough. Mom. I choose you, and I choose the kids. Brielle looked at her husband, her face crumbling. You'll regret this. His silence was her answer. She yanked the door open. I won't let this go. You'll lose everything. Her voice cracked. I watched her go. No, Brielle, I said softly. You're the one who's losing. You've thrown away the one thing money can't buy, respect. We'll see you in court, she screamed. I smiled, unafraid. The air crackled with finality after Brielle's threat. Good. Because this time, the court won't just ask who's right, it'll ask who forgot how to be human. Her high heels hammered a frantic, retreating rhythm on the metal stairs, a countdown to a legal storm. When the sound died, Mason sank into the chair, head in his hands. I don't even know where to start, he mumbled. Start by keeping your word, I countered, pouring him tea. Tomorrow, apologize to Penelope and the neighbors. Tell them everything, no excuses. And from now on, you'll pay your own rent, tuition, every last bill. I can help, but I won't bankroll you anymore. He nodded, a faint, sober light in his red-rimmed eyes. I offered the tea. Drink it, so you remember the taste of truth. Bitter at first, clean after. I understand, Mom, he managed after a small sip. No, Mason, I corrected softly. You're learning to understand. I watched his headlights fade into the savannah mist. Picking up my pen, I added a final line to my notebook. Tonight, my son chose what's right over what's easy. Forgiveness comes with terms because love isn't a servant. The clack of a liar's heels travels far, but in the end, silence wins. I blew out the candle, leaving my tired, peaceful face framed in the streetlight. The next afternoon, the sun finally broke through the gloom. With a beige cardigan and a small bag holding my lottery ticket and ID, I met attorney Grant Holloway. Ready, Lorraine? He asked. I've been ready for 7 years, Grant. Today I'm just reclaiming what's fair. At the sleek glass Georgia lottery office, a staffer led us into a verification room. The middle-aged prize records manager confirmed the winning ticket number, 78 amp 4539. I gently laid the ticket on the table. After gloved inspection, signature matching, and a quick check of the corner store's security footage, which clearly showed me signing the ticket, the manager declared, the ticket is valid. We'll seal and process the payout today. The relief I felt was a pure release, not a mere exhale. When presented with options, I chose a small initial disbursement to cover immediate needs. The remainder goes into a trust named the Arthur and Lorraine Whitmore Trust, I stated clearly. It was a shield, a way to keep the cleanest part of my life intact. Holloway finalized the paperwork for a private trust, ensuring no public names or media access. I'd had enough noise, I wanted quiet. Before leaving, I instructed Holloway to submit Penelope Banks's handwritten statement, detailing how Brielle and Mason began spending before any money arrived. Not just for me, I said, but for the truth. I want the record to show that kindness isn't stupidity. On the drive back, I discussed my plans for the first funds, an independent education trust for Ava and Micah. The terms were binding, access at 18 with proof of schooling, and absolutely no early withdrawals or adult interference. I've lived long enough to know money only matters when it stays where it should, I told a surprised Holloway. That evening, I signed a lease for a small, quiet house near Seabrook Bay, a porch facing the water, a little garden. I paid to have a trellis of velvety red, strong-scented climbing roses planted. I want to open the door each morning and remember him, not with tears, but with fragrance. As I packed, my phone pinged with an email from Brielle, legal notice and health warning. The attachment was a forged medical report claiming I had severe memory impairment and lacked financial capacity. She still didn't understand the game was over. I forwarded it to Holloway. Within minutes, he called back, recognizing the fatal error. She's just made a serious mistake, that's defamation with fabricated documents. People only lie when they're afraid of the truth, I observed quietly. Now, the law was on my side. I lay down that night and slept deep. The money was secondary, what soothed me most was proving I wasn't crazy, wasn't weak, and didn't need anyone to define my worth. Looking at Arthur's photo, I whispered, "See, love? I kept signing my own name just like you told me." In May, the official court notice arrived. Brielle had filed a suit seeking custody of Ava and Micah. The nearly 100-page complaint accused me of manipulating Mason and of financial incompetence. I read the accusations, half laughing, half sighing. Brielle still chose to swap the roles of victim and culprit. 2 weeks later, the hearing opened before Judge Meredith Shaw. Brielle, immaculate but gripping Mason's hand, a shackle, not a comforting touch, sat across the aisle. The social worker's report painted a clear picture. My new Seabrook house was clean and suitable. Mason's home was well maintained. Brielle's residence, by contrast, was marred by an unpaid mortgage and disturbance complaints. Witnesses followed. Penelope Banks, with her frayed notebook, recounted Brielle's insults, my quiet help, and my eventual forced departure. 2 neighbors confirmed her account. The store manager validated my purchase and signing of the ticket. Then, the final, undeniable proof. Holloway played the porch camera video of Brielle throwing my belongings out the window, shouting, "Go die in a nursing home." The court fell silent. Judge Shaw's voice was steady as she addressed Brielle. Verbal abuse, control, and defamation of an elder without physical violence still constitute serious psychological abuse. Brielle dissolved into tears, claiming stress. Mason took the stand, presenting a detailed, sober plan for single fatherhood, including proof of parenting counseling and a stable budget. He confirmed I had set up an education trust but made it clear, she doesn't interfere in my personal life. After all these years, he finally knew how to speak honestly. When I spoke, my words were simple: I'm not here to win or lose. I just want my 2 grandkids to be safe and grow up in a home without fear. Whichever side can give them that, that's the side I'll support. The ruling was swift. Primary custody was granted to Mason, with supervised visitation for Brielle, conditioned on mandatory counseling. The lottery suit was dismissed entirely, and Brielle was formally reprimanded for defamation and manipulation of medical information. Judge Shaw's final words were a bomb: truth does not need a defender, it only needs time. And time has done its work. Outside, the Seabrook wind whipped my silver hair. I let it fly wild, a sign of freedom. Holloway beamed. I had won 2 cases at once. I don't need anyone to know I won, I told him. I just need the kids to know truth won. Penelope rushed over for a hug. Mason, finally, held my hand tight, the grip I'd waited 7 years to feel. He announced he wanted to move to Seabrook, nearby, so the kids could run over anytime. I simply nodded, a tear of release slipping away. At my new home, I wrote the final lines in my old notebook. Today, the court didn't just rule on Brielle, it ruled on my 7 years of silence. The price of deceit is losing trust. The reward for resolve is peace. Life settled into a rhythm of quiet self-respect. Mason and the kids visited often. Ava's laughter rang out as she learned to ride the turquoise bicycle I bought her, after making her promise: never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve good things. Mason, growing into his role as a father, started a support group for single dads, learning to set boundaries and take responsibility. My own project, Hands for Home, began, helping exploited seniors find housing. Penelope joined, and we repainted an old dining table, setting it in my living room with Arthur's favorite red roses. It became a gathering spot, a place where no one would ever be insulted. One afternoon, during a sudden downpour, I heard a sound at the gate. Brielle stood there, soaked, the arrogance replaced by a profound exhaustion. "I need help," she whispered. I invited her onto the porch but kept the door closed. Boundaries were a choice. She confessed to losing everything, humbled and depleted by her own choices. I offered her hot mint tea and an envelope containing no cash, only a list of job centers and counseling groups. "There are no shortcuts, Brielle," I said. "Only responsibility and repair." I confirmed the court's requirement for supervised visits after she completed counseling. "I won't hand you cash. Not $1. But if you need a hot meal or advice, this porch stays open as long as you walk in with honesty. I'm sorry, Lorraine, she choked out. I hear you, and I accept it in my own way. I watched her small figure fade into the rain-streaked road. The loop of resentment finally snapped on my end. That night, at the dinner table with Mason, Ava, and Micah, a quiet, simple love filled the room. Ava proudly told me she fell off her bike and got up without crying, remembering my words. Micah, his hands folded, offered a prayer. I pray my mom gets better soon. Watching the dark red sunset over Seabrook Bay, I knew I had chosen self-respect, clarity, and love with limits. I wrote the last lines in my notebook. No one can start a new chapter by rereading the old one forever. Today, I closed the book, not to end it, but to begin again. I lit a candle for Arthur's photo. Love, I've gone farther than the pain, and I've come back to myself. The candle faded, leaving only the scent of cinnamon and the steady hush of the sea, the final lullaby for a woman who found peace in herself.